like Tucker. So Tuesday night edition. Thanks for joining us. You are in the right spot. As soon as I get my window open here on the stream, I'm going to call out everybody who's in the chat to make sure that all the early responders are rewarded with the acknowledgement that they deserve. We got a good lineup for you tonight.
Always.
And as you can tell, Delaney is back. Delaney, while I'm getting this final stuff set up here, would you do you mind sharing a story about why you missed the stream last week, just so people are aware? Or do you not want to share?
Okay, well, I mean, I'll share it. I mean, y'all are probably going to think I'm weak as fuck, but I don't care. So I have a little dog, for those of you who watch the stream regularly. Well, last Friday night, my family and I kind of noticed that he was limping on his foot, his front paw. And on Saturday afternoon, my family and I helped clear out our back patio area. We had a spa back there. And when we lifted the spa and moved it, we had noticed that there were a ton of spiders. So I was like, okay, he's limping, he's lethargic, like something's wrong. So we took him to the vet. And then, because I thought it was a spider bite, like a black widow bite or something, because my mind always goes to the catastrophizes as a woman.
Well, at least you acknowledge
Well, we
that.
took him to the vet. Yeah, well, I mean, and that's my baby. So if it's my when it's my baby, I'm gonna react pretty poorly. So we took him to the vet, and I mean, they did an X-ray, they took blood samples, and no spider bite, thank goodness. But it turns out he's just like a sprain. But crisis averted. It's nothing more than just like a little sprain, and he's fine now. He's doing good. So that's all I care about.
Got a good outcome there, and glad to see you back on the stream. I was a little worried that I have to do 2 days in a row without you, but you are back.
No,
and
I'm here.
I specifically talked about abortion when you weren't here because I knew you would really have a heavy opinion on that. So I don't know if you watched it or not, but we did talk about abortion for a good portion of the stream because it was relevant to the news.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Anyway.
I didn't watch. I didn't get a chance, but I'll watch it again. But yeah, good job avoiding the abortion topic with me.
We've got a decent show lined up for you guys tonight. A lot of interesting news coming out. A lot of it cyber and technology related, which I like because that's kind of my area of expertise anyway. So I like talking about that stuff and kind of linking the bigger picture to the aspects of technology and how that controls our lives. But first, we're going to run to a story from Pennsylvania to give us a little bit of a lesson in incentives around gun control. Now, I know Pennsylvania is a little more open about the gun stuff, and I'm actually unsure about how to feel with this story. So this is going to be more of an exercise of thinking out loud and having the viewers try to help me figure out what to think about this, which is a little more rare. Usually I'm just telling you guys, what my opinion is on particular stories. We got a story about Uber and Airbnb. You guys may have noticed if you use these services throughout the pandemic, they have been, kind of cheap, actually. And the news is indicating that those prices are going to start going up, not just marginally, but significantly, because these businesses have been taking a huge hit during the pandemic in order to accommodate for the lower traffic. So we'll look at the bigger picture with that, what the story behind that is, and why those prices are going to be skyrocketing. We got another cyber attack, of course. It seems like we're doing those every single day now, talking about cyber attacks. We got a very interesting story from Alameda County regarding their COVID death counts. They, let's just say they made some updates. Okay, I'm going to try to leave as much of a cliffhanger there as I can, but it's going to prove some of the narratives and some of the ideas that we've shared here previously. It's going to prove them absolutely 100% correct as usual, because I'm never wrong. We're going to be talking about a cloud computing outage that you guys probably didn't know about because it happened this morning when most of America was asleep, but it took down almost every major tech service and website on the planet, because websites are global. And everything was out for about an hour, including stuff like Amazon and Reddit, big websites, okay? Not just a little outage. We're going to talk about why centralization is not just a bad thing in policy, government, and socially, but also technologically speaking. And then finally, we got an article about the lab leak. I know you guys have been waiting for me to talk about that because I haven't mentioned a lab leak in a couple weeks. And there's been some news that has come out since then. So we're going to take a look at that, take a look at some of the things that Fauci said, And then, of course, look at the bigger picture behind that, because this show is all about the bigger picture. Now, as soon as I can find my...
Oh, I was going to say, Jeremy, we're going to get banned for this one for sure.
Yes, folks. By the way, I did put a link to the Telegram in the description, so you can join my Telegram there. The locals page is also available for backups, because we are going where few dare to tread tonight. And to commemorate that and show you how serious I actually am, I have my drink here with me. Cheers. Let's do it.
Cheers, Jeremy. Let's do this shit.
I've managed to make it almost a week without having to... I didn't mention the bun at all last time because I was just seeing if anybody would notice. Nobody said anything in chat. So I skipped by, but now it's unavoidable. Yes, I do have my hair in a samurai bun. And feel free to make fun of me for that. I'm willing to take all the criticism that should come with that. Totally fine. Go for it. Let's start off the night with our story from Pennsylvania regarding their gun control laws. Let me switch over Windows here.
Okay.
This is an article from PennLive.com. Pennsylvania House sends local gun law preemption bill to state Senate. Now, I'll be completely honest with you guys. I just found this. I mean, if you look at, it was just updated today at 5:48 p.m. I just found this. I was reading through it, trying to understand what's really going on. And let me try to summarize so I can save you the pain of having to read through this very long article. Basically, the state of Pennsylvania has pretty open gun laws, as far as I'm aware. And the localities have taken upon themselves to create laws that are more restrictive than the state laws. So, in reaction to that, we see the Pennsylvania House, the state, fighting back with a law that says... This bill's language gives legal standing to challenge a local gun law to any person who could legally own a gun in Pennsylvania, as well as any membership organization of which said person is a member. That opens the door for court challenges by groups like the NRA to local jurisdictions, which they have a lot of money. NRA, you know that, right? So,
Oh, yeah.
basically, the reason I found this story so fascinating is because I've always tried to advocate in the past for pushing as much authority to localities as possible. So when I initially read this, I thought to myself, oh, good, the localities have more control over their ability to, control, or I thought it was reverse. I thought the state had more gun control than the localities, and the localities wanted to open it up. But then I read into it, and it's the exact opposite. So, I mean, my principle is doesn't seem to hold up here. I don't know. What do you think? Should the localities have the ability to impose more restrictive rules than the state does?
I mean, yes, they can, but then that's where the power of the state versus your local comes into play. And so I don't know. This is going to be a tough one to wrap your head around, especially since this is having to do with guns and, your ability to protect yourself, which I feel like the Second Amendment should trump all of it. But at the end of the day, I do believe that it's up to the local governments to be able to figure this out for themselves as well. So this is a tough one, man.
The Second Amendment thing is interesting, and this is why I gotta tell you guys, this is the discussion we're gonna have here. Okay, we're thinking out loud, so don't feel bad if I say something stupid or you say something stupid, whatever. We're thinking out loud here.
Yeah.
The Second Amendment thing is interesting because if you think about it, is it the case that we should have a set of principles or laws that overarch state and federal and local governments that go all the way down to the very bottom level that nobody can mess with, because that's what the Second Amendment is, right? Should that be the case? I mean, I would argue that should be the case. That's what constitutionalism would imply, right?
I think so too. I
But
mean, that's what the first 10 amendments are about. These are rights, and these are rights that you just naturally have. Even like which amendment is it, where it's like even the states and the local governments have their own authority too. So that's why it's kind of hard to figure this out, because it's all just like very convoluted and very difficult to figure it all out all at once.
And that's why let's go to the chat, see what chat has to say, because this is the class participation part where you're in the classroom and the teacher says, "Okay, class, you're gonna get some class participation now," and you have to, against your will, you have to be coerced into submitting your opinion so that you can supplement the streamer's content.
I mean, maybe so. If these local places in Pennsylvania are passing these strict gun laws, and people who are for the Second Amendment are not okay with it, they're probably going to see like an exodus of people out of these counties and these local municipalities that are passing these things.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I say it's a question of incentives. That's what I like about this. Even though I'm not particularly in favor of what's going on, I like the fact that they're playing with the incentives underlying it as opposed to implementing the controls directly. So we got Steve Husted, Dari, Bill from All Minus One in chat, Arian, Corey TV. Let's see, Tim, that's a new name. Tim in Iowa says, "Wrong think." Here we go. Yes, sir. Plenty of wrong think on this stream for sure. We're two strikes in, no one strike in. I mean, it's not fun if you're not doing wrong think, right? Synergy, what's up?
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a bunch of good contributors in chat. If you rock a man bun, you better carry a sword. So it's not a man bun, it's a samurai bun. And you are correct, samurais did have buns. Okay, so don't call it a man bun.
Mm-hmm.
It's a samurai bun. I want to be specific about that. I am appropriating Japanese culture, and I do have to admit, I do think Japanese culture is superior to ours. So this is my way of signifying that I am ceding my superiority of the Japanese culture. Let's see. Texas is ready for NRA to come join them, says Dari. Okay. Yes, sir. Oh, Synergy, it's okay that you were late, buddy. It's not. That's okay. You can see the intro again.
Yeah, it's okay.
So here's what's interesting about this. I called it a lesson in incentives because all they're doing is, instead of saying none of the localities can have their own laws, they're saying the localities have to face the repercussions of having their own laws. So they're basically opening up the localities to lawsuits directly from people like organizations as big as the NRA. And if you're going to make changes, regardless of whether I agree with the changes or not, I think that this actually demonstrates an understanding of incentives. And it's no surprise that this is coming from Republicans. If you're going to make changes, this is a more appropriate way to do it, as opposed to just straight up outlawing localities from making their own laws. That's kind of my unrefined take on it right now.
Yeah. I mean, if these localities have agreed that this is what they want, then let them do it. I mean, let them do it. And then the people who are living in them that don't agree have the freedom to leave and go somewhere else that agrees with them more. Unfortunately, I wish that everybody would just understand the Second Amendment and allow people to have their guns. But unfortunately, there's a lot of dumbasses out there that are like, no, guns are bad. Not the people that wield them. It's the gun itself. It's stupid.
And we're going to talk about those people in particular tonight as well. I think the overall theme of the show will become apparent later as we go. And it's kind of overarching all of these topics. So don't worry. There's going to be yet to be revealed the main topic of the show. Holly says Texas is too hot. West Virginia is better than Texas, says Bill. Well, hey, Bill, you know what? I'm on board with both, okay? I'm looking at both for land, so maybe we can get a compound together in West Virginia sometime. Okay, well.
Yeah, that $7 million compound that Bill wants to build.
We'll get there eventually. We just got to start a GoFundMe. That's the only thing I really wanted to bring up with that story. It's not about the guns. It's not about the laws. It's about the fact that they're using incentives. Okay, that's the big picture with that. And I like that. I'd like to see more of that, where you modify the underlying incentives underneath things that you want to change. You don't change the things directly. You don't say, we're going to admit exactly 50% black people to this college. You don't make the explicit change that you're trying to make. You make downstream changes in the incentives to get to that number in a more organic fashion. So, that's just a good theme that I want to try to make sure you guys are aware of, and that's underlying that story. So, and let's move on to our next story of the night here. This one's a little more interesting to me. As soon as I can find the right window here, don't mind me just flying around. The price of Uber and Airbnbs are about to be jacked up. This is from Futurism.com. Now, Futurism.com, in my opinion, is a little left-leaning, so they're less likely to give you the real truth about what's going on. They kind of give you the Bay Area tech shadowy explanation of the real explanations. But let's take a look at what they have to say and then see if we can't decipher it. Companies now dare ask a bold question: what if we actually made money?
Oh, darn capitalism.
Don't mind me, I'm just chugging my giant mug here. Unfortunately for everyone who got used to booking suspiciously cheap rides across town or taking affordable vacations while living in a stranger's home, like you, Delaney, you were always taking Airbnbs to my place. Or not Airbnbs.
You mean Uber? Yeah, I was taking a whole house with me.
It's a new Airbnb. It's a hybrid of Uber and Airbnb where you get to use a mobile home rental, and then so you get all the amenities of a house while you're transferring yourself.
Have an RV come and take me like 5 miles.
It's you laugh, but you'll see in like 2 years it's gonna be a real business now. And if anybody in chat steals that, I want royalties.
Yeah. Now somebody's going to steal it. They're going to see this and steal our idea. We need to like patent this idea.
Yes, I'll get on that. So companies like Airbnb and Uber are emerging from the pandemic much more expensive than they were before. On average, Lyft and Uber rides cost 40% more now than they did last year. The average Airbnb is 35% more expensive, and food delivery apps have been gradually raising prices and adding new fees as well, according to the New York Times. Yeah, food delivery apps. So I don't use any of those. So I have kind of resisted. I don't know if you guys are like me or not, but some people I feel like you're either all in or you're all out with this kind of stuff. I think I've ordered DoorDash once, and Uber only when I'm going to the airport. That's it. Airbnb I think I've done once for a concert like 4 years ago, but I know people who do this stuff every single day. So while this doesn't affect me directly, this is going to affect a lot of people, especially in places like San Francisco where they don't have cars. People in cities don't have cars. They use Uber every single day. So
yep. They take an Uber, and especially in San Francisco. I know people who take Ubers just to get down the street, and it's like, you seriously just can't walk.
Well,
they're
like,
no, I don't want to.
When you consider the obstacles in the way, you got piles of human feces, used needles, guys laying across the sidewalk.
True.
It's like that. You ever play that old game Paperboy, where you're riding the bike and then there's like stuff in the road?
Yes. There's rocks. There's ramps. There's construction.
Yeah. That's what walking around in San Francisco is like. It's like Paperboy. Part of the reason, according to the publication, is that companies are trying to actually turn a profit after all, but incinerating cash for years, ending the era of cheap services subsidized by extremely patient and perhaps gullible Silicon Valley investors. So they are taking a loss in the hopes that their market share is going to grow large enough that they'll turn a profit once the hardship period is over. Interesting strategy, but
also too in California they passed Proposition 22, which makes them have to give their employees benefits and stuff too. So now on top of that, they actually have to pay their employees like really well and give them benefits. So people thought that like Prop 22 is all good and fine, and I was like, it's just going to make the prices for stuff go up for Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, it delineates where they used to be contract workers, that just could receive a wage. The companies are now required to provide them with the benefits of a full-time actual employee. That's what Prop 22 did. Great point.
Well, if they work over a certain
amount
of hours, I think.
Right, yeah. And what do you think the odds are they'll mention that in this article? I don't think they do actually.
Probably not.
When I skimmed through before.
Well, they won't, because guess who were the ones that were lobbying and promoting Prop 22? It was all like, I feel like that whole thing was such a scam. Like it was such a scam. And it even affected people who weren't working for Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and all these other companies. It
Hmm.
affects like independent contractors, people who just they do their own thing. That
Anybody on a 1099, basically.
anybody on a 1099, like my family, I have family members that work on 1099s. It
Hmm.
affects them. They're self-employed. They don't report to anybody, but they're on a 1099 and it affects them as well. So it's just, that whole
Yep.
thing was such a scam. That's why I voted no for it. Plus I got kicked out of an Uber I got kicked out of a Lyft by somebody, so by a driver, and I told him I wasn't going to vote on Prop 22 because of him.
Yeah, Bill in chat says my wife used to travel a ton for work. Both services are indispensable. Yeah, that's the problem here. This is one of the underlying themes of the show tonight. You're going to realize that these technologies that people have slowly become dependent on. They are a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people are dependent on these now, and when variables change and things happen in society, you can see a massive, catastrophic butterfly effect in how these things affect people's lives. I did hear a stereo check come in. I neglected to answer it because we got Paul. What's up, Paul?
Saw the bun, Jeremy, the last stream, but I'm a fucking dude. I'm not gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So it doesn't matter. Plus, I'm too old to care what people think about me.
There you go.
Hell yeah.
Appreciate
Love you,
that, Paul.
Paul. Good job, Paul.
All
I
right.
think his bun looks great, personally.
Well, thank you. It's definitely a lot easier than having to. This is the pandemic era, okay? I literally shaved a mohawk in my head when the pandemic started just to let everybody know that I was ready. If Mad Max happened, I'll be in the car with the mask on. And this is the remnants of that. I have not cut the hair since the mohawk, so the mohawk still is here. Okay, just to let everyone know. Uh,
Just wanted to give people a signal to how crazy you're willing to get.
exactly. No, that's really it. You have to let people know. Um, let's see.
Hmm. I mean, Antifa, they go just straight down the middle, but you at least had some sense and did on both sides and not down the middle. Like they'll literally take clippers and just go, vrrr,
Oh
and then
yeah,
there'll be
no,
hair on both sides.
no. I wasn't trying to display that I was mentally ill. Just that I was ready to fight if necessary. That's the difference.
Hmm.
Okay.
And he won't
Let's
have hair in his face to hold him back.
exactly won't disrupt my vision. Motor Gong in chat says, excluding disabled people, the drivers I see waiting and driving around for a front parking spot are overweight. So Motor Gong brings up a very pertinent topic that I would love to talk about here, and that is people who wait for parking spots. I think this is an epidemic of its own, where you can go to Costco and you get held up by somebody who is waiting in their car for a spot close as possible to the store while there's open spots basically like right behind them or 30 seconds back, trying to save themselves literally 20 seconds of walking. Those people are what I classify in a group of people that I call that you should be dead or you would be dead. And I'm not going to kill anybody. I don't want to kill anybody, but I'm just saying, in a world where we had to, there wasn't all the niceties and the softness of modern life, they would be dead because they wouldn't be able to, like wait for someone to come back to the tribe with food. They would want to go out indiscriminately and try to find something and then kill themselves in the process. Things like that. But anyway, thank you for mentioning
Hmm.
that. Very, very important topic that I'd love to talk about every time.
I'm, yeah, I personally think so. You know how like they'll give handicap placards to like fat people, and they'll like
Oh,
say you're
yeah.
disabled, so here's a placard. I think if you're like morbidly obese and you're technically disabled, you shouldn't get a handicap placard that gets you closer to the store. You
Hmm.
should like park really far away and get some exercise. Like they should tell them like you need to park really far and walk. The only kind of cripples that should be getting the good parking spots are like the quadriplegics and the paraplegics and the ones that are like actually really and like super 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 old people. But
Yeah.
like if you're just a fatty and are like living off disability because you're a fatty, I'm sorry, you need to walk.
Well, remember, we live in a society where, as a response to a pandemic that only kills fat people and old people, we give them donuts and beer for free for getting the vaccine. And we also don't tell them to lose fat. So, this is the type of society that we live in, Delaney. It is upside down, okay?
Oh, I know it is. Yeah.
Doug Master says we need more gasoline. Yes, we absolutely do, and I'm in the right spot to do it now that I'm in Texas. Have you gotten your cowboy hat yet? No, actually, good point. I need to work on that. Maybe I'll get one this weekend. I'm gonna go with
Yeah.
cowboy hat and Pit Viper sunglasses. I think I'm gonna try to rock that look. You guys seen the Pit Viper sunglasses?
Oh yeah. My barber, when he had his mullet, he was wearing the Pit Viper sunglasses all the time.
I'm
I
gonna
was like,
try
wow,
it.
you look like it's like you look like total white trash with that mullet and those Pit Viper
Yes,
glasses.
sir. Yes, sir. All right, we got a stereo comment, and then we'll continue on with the article here. Paul?
It's funny you talk about the people too lazy to freaking just park and walk. Go to Google Maps, any map program, satellite, go to that. You can see a literal ass. Oh man, what is it? The bell curve. You can see a bell curve in front of every Walmart or any big department store parking lot. It is a bell curve. It peaks in front of the doors that are open, and it graduates to both sides.
Yeah, that's a
It's
great point.
hilarious and sad.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. I mean, as people try to organically find the closest spot, it would form a natural bell curve, I imagine, like that. Physically, it's good. It's a good point. I personally, I always try to go towards the back just by default because I like to get the walk in. I don't ever
Yeah,
try
me
to get
too.
a spot that's close. I do not care at all ever.
Yeah, but by the time when you get a parking spot in the back, by the time you get your parking spot, you're already like halfway to the store. And the
Yep.
person that's driving around waiting for a closer parking spot is going to continue to still be driving. So just time efficiency that's a smart move to do.
Yeah, it's clear that they're not doing it for the time thing, and I know we're hanging on this parking topic, but believe me, there's a narrative underneath it here, okay? But the parking thing is important because it demonstrates a large societal problem, and that is the mass unwillingness to experience any kind of adversity, no matter how small that it is. As small as an adversity of walking from a parking spot to a store is something that they will spend time that you can never get back in order to avoid. And that is, I mean, you can see the manifestation of the unwillingness to experience adversity in all aspects of our culture. America is, we just talked about it last week, 30% obese, probably 70 to 80% overweight, because we don't want to exercise. We don't want to have to forego the gratification of eating food, stuff like that. This is a big problem, and we joke about it, but it displays openly a huge problem in American and Western culture. So there's that. Continuing on from the Futurism article here. There are likely other factors at work too. A year ago, the U.S. was in the early months of the coronavirus pandemic. Okay, here we go. So now we're getting into, they're going to blame the coronavirus, right? Both the rideshare and travel industries were essentially on hiatus, leaving drivers and hosts stuck without income. Okay, so stop, pause. Hold on. Both the rideshare and travel industries were essentially on hiatus, leaving drivers and hosts stuck without income. Well, that's a very interesting way of saying the government shut their businesses down, isn't it? Because it wasn't organically on hiatus.
Yeah. Well, and I love how they're trying to paint it as like the company didn't want the drivers and hosts to do their job. No, there was a huge, like, because I did Uber. I didn't drive, but I was using Uber a lot last year, and I would have to wait forever because there were so few drivers on the road. And I would ask the drivers, like, what's going on? And they're like, nobody wants to drive. Everybody's collecting unemployment and getting good money on unemployment, so nobody wants to drive. And then there are the few drivers that are on the road. You have to wait forever for them, and they charge you a little bit more. So it's not like Uber or Lyft or, that these companies, there's not a demand. There's a huge demand. It's just they just didn't have enough drivers to meet the demand.
So now also think about the fact that there's nowhere to go because the government has shut down bowling alleys, bars, restaurants, everywhere that you would normally go in an Uber has been shut down by the government. So it's not the coronavirus pandemic that put these people on hiatus. Let's be 100% clear about that. I think what's going to happen now, and one of the reasons why I want to talk about this article, is because we're going to start to see Now, I'll admit this isn't a unique idea for me, but we're going to start to see a split in history. We're actually we are living through a time where history is splitting into two realities. There's going to be two histories written about the pandemic. There's going to be one where the people who lived through it acknowledge that the government was the one that shut everything down. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. We're going to live. Some people on one side are going to acknowledge that this thing only really ever killed fat people and old people. It wasn't killing children. It wasn't killing normal people. And then the other side is the exact opposite of both of those, where they think that the coronavirus is some act of God that just came out of nowhere, and the stores are closed because of coronavirus, and the death counts, they don't look into it at all, so they don't know that, they think kids are dying. Right? They think kids are dying by the tens of thousands every day. That we're seeing the splitting of history, and I think that's both fascinating and terrifying, because there will be two histories books written about this whole pandemic.
No, there's always two histories to everything. Like even just like the history that we have for like the Civil War. There's the history that the Confederacy has, and then there's the history that the North has. And it's like, who do you really believe? I tend to kind of like listen to both and just kind of make my assumptions about it. But yeah, you're right, Jeremy. In like 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years from now, when we talk about this, or when our children talk about this, or grandchildren, they're going to be like, wow, why did you guys shut everything down for this pandemic when it really wasn't that necessary? And there's not going to be really anybody to sit there and give them the actual truth, which is the government is the one that did it, not us. Well, we didn't want to. None of us really wanted to shut anything down.
Oh, I think there were some mentally ill people that wanted to shut them down, but we all know who those are. The mutants, right? The mutants, they wanted to shut everything down. They wanted to get that sense of importance and moral superiority by yelling at people to wear masks and whatnot.
Yep.
But
they wanted to make themselves feel beautiful. They wanted to make themselves feel beautiful by making everybody else cover up their ugly faces.
Well, you're not wrong. We do know that the psychological mutations are directly correlated with physical mutations as well. So these people do tend to be ugly. But I want to point out, you did bring up a great point. This isn't a unique thing, I guess, seeing kind of a split in history. But it is interesting that in an event this large, we get to live through it. Like, we get to live through the time that it happened. But now we can watch two histories diverge. If you turn on CNN, you're going to see one history being told. If you turn on Fox News, you're going to see another history being told, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, it's I don't know, pretty interesting. We got Osis in stereo. Dropped a comment.
Now, I'm not too big on conspiracy theories, but what you're saying just put a thought in my brain. If I was China and I wanted to bioengineer a virus to mess with the United States, what would I want it to do? Without pissing off the United States, I'd want it to attack fat people and old people, especially old people, because boomers run this country, and boomers are terrified of death. They're terrified of everything. They want everything for themselves because they're one of the most selfish groups of individuals that have ever existed on the face of this planet. So, killing boomers and fat people is totally advantageous to disrupting the United States economy. They know it would play into their hands. So that's just an interesting idea. I don't.
No, that actually is it makes you wonder when you look at who this thing actually affected. I'm glad you said that it put the thought in your head, because I mean that's what we try to do here. Okay, we don't try to tell you how to think. We help you try to figure out. We don't tell you what to think. We tell you how to think. That's the kind of stuff you need to be wondering. And we're not trying to get you to go down any conspiracy pathways, but it's awfully coincidental that China, and specifically Wuhan, where it originated from, we were seeing stories of them back to normal partying and pool parties with no masks on and concerts and stuff last year. Okay, while we were still like suffering the direct result of this. So let's say that case is true, Osis, where they've manufactured something that was kind of a pyrrhic, self-inflicted attack to some degree as well. but would that be something that China would do? And I think the answer to that, it would, not did. Okay, we're not talking about did, we're talking about would. Would China inflict damage upon themselves to inflict a net greater harm on their enemies like America? I think the answer to that is a clear yes for me.
I think so too. I mean, they got enough people over there. They're totally willing to sacrifice people in order to get ahead.
Now, the current outlook appears that it's a lab leak. Okay, so there's no intention. We're not implying any intention to this, but how genius would that be if you released it internally on your own people first, knowing that it would spread to America eventually anyway, and then kill thousands and millions of fat and old people? Makes you wonder. I mean, it could be a plot of a good book anyway.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like Stephen King or somebody's writing something about it.
No, Stephen King's writing a book about how Biden saved us all from the pandemic and that Trump had absolutely nothing to do with fast-tracking the manufacture. Yeah, and that Trump Trump's response...
Okay.
No, Stephen King's book would be about how Trump's response was so bad that he caused the pandemic. That's what Stephen King's book. So for those of you who don't know, Stephen King has massive Trump derangement syndrome, like one of the worst cases.
He's got that TDS.
One of the worst cases I've ever seen. So he unfortunately he would not be in favor of the truth on that one, I don't think. All right. So the moral of the story on the Airbnb thing is obviously that both not only is technology intertwined in our lives to a degree that we don't really fully comprehend until it's gone, really giving meaning to the saying you don't know what you got till it's gone, but also people are already writing kind of alternative histories of why these businesses had to suffer so greatly during the pandemic. It wasn't the pandemic that shut these businesses down. It was the government that shut these businesses down. And I think it's important that we keep that in mind as we go along. I think it's only going to be people like us that perpetuate that narrative, because I'll tell you what, the mainstream narratives, the mainstream media, the history books, they're not going to tell that. So it's people like us that have to keep that narrative. Like we're back in Stone Age era now, where we tell stories through word of mouth only. You know, there was a point in time where all these legends, even like, you know, back in the Greek mythology days and stuff, you had to tell these stories through word of mouth only. And they weren't written down. There weren't DVDs with the videos of them on them. There weren't flash drives. There wasn't internet hard drives. You had to tell them by word of mouth. And we're, in one respect, we're back to that dynamic now with this stuff. And even then, it's a little tough because you get banned off stereo or YouTube. So
yeah, went from word of mouth to song to telegrams to newspapers to TV to social media, and now we're back to just talking about it.
Well, the next logical step would be to make a song about it then, right? If we're going to repeat the process. Yeah. So we have to make a song.
Ooh, that's a good idea, Jeremy. We should make a song about it to keep it forever infamous.
Yes. We'll have to work on that. Let's see. We got 2 comments that came in, and then we'll get on to the next story.
Devil's advocate about the boomer thing. Yeah, they suck. But their mass death due to COVID-19 is just going to ease the burden on Social Security. That's actually spicier hot take conspiracy in a completely different direction.
Oh man! So we have this giant bubble.
Get them off that SS check.
We have a giant bubble of Social Security that's going to explode if we don't trim the fat a little bit. Is that what you? That's a new one. I like it. But see, hey, I like that though. That's a sign that he's thinking. I like that. That's a good proposition.
Well, what I forgot to mention is we also have the highest per capita, I think, or at least around the highest per capita amount of fat people in the world.
Yep.
Fat people and poor health. So if you engineer a virus that takes out old people and fat people, it's going to hurt the United States the most. That was just something I forgot to mention.
No.
Oh yeah, we definitely have the most fat people for sure.
Yeah, and then people look at the numbers and they're wondering, why is America so disproportionately bad with our numbers? Oh, it must be Trump, Donald Trump. Well, no. But also, let me take that Chinese conspiracy theory thing a little bit deeper, one level deeper, because the virus is only going to be this effective if there was this many fat people in America to begin with, right? So let's just say, hypothetically speaking, 50, 60 years ago, some Chinese guys got together and they're like, all right, how do we, I mean, because they read The Art of War, right? So they know how to do war. They probably know how they can destroy America without one single troop dying. And this is a way to do it. You implant ideas in the society that being fat is okay, that eating sugar is okay, that not exercising and stuff is okay. And then all of a sudden, you let that kind of sink in for a while. And then you see magazine covers like the ones that we showed you that literally say on the front of Cosmopolitan, in the middle of a pandemic that only kills fat people, a picture of an obese woman in yoga pants. Obese woman, not an overweight woman, an obese woman in yoga pants. And on the title, it says, "This is healthy." So before that pandemic to be as effective as it was on fat people, you had to create the fat people. Fast food, processed foods, the culture behind encouraging fat people, the Baizuo, the white left phenomenon, exploiting that to start a cultural movement that says being fat is cool, fat acceptance, fat phobia, fat hate, all that kind of stuff, the social justice stuff that supports and encourages people to be fat. That all had to be in place for this to be effective. So was that also part of the Chinese plan? And then that should make you realize that we are in a constant state of war at all times. There's not to be a single troop firing a gun. There's to be no tanks driving through fields, no planes in the air. We are in a constant state of war. It's just that it's moved into psychological and information. Okay, so just keep that in mind. We are in a constant state of war. And
Yeah.
that will be no better indicated by our next story here, which is from MSN.com.
Ooh.
Man, I love MSN.com. It's been around for so long. One of
They're so trusted.
One of the OGs. Vendor for house offices hit with ransomware attack. That's right, folks.
Oh no.
Yep. So it's time to play. Name that. What cyber attack of the week? And I'm playing some Price is Right music right now. What's it going to be today, folks? Is it going to be a cyber attack on a military? Is it going to be a cyber attack on our critical infrastructure? Is it a critical attack on our corporations? Let's find out right now from MSN.com. From Washington, a private company that provides constituents services to congressional and state government offices was the victim of a ransomware attack, becoming the latest entity targeted by cyber criminals amid growing calls for the U.S. companies to bolster their cyber defenses. Cyber defense, what an interesting keyword. It's almost as if... Wait. Oh, I know where else that I have seen that word, cyber defense. In the degree that I have. Oh, it's almost like I can see the future. Yes, that's right, folks. I have a degree in cyber defense. If you didn't know that was a thing, it's because it's brand new. And you should get one, too. I highly recommend it because, as you can see, you will have job security for a long time. Boomware attack helicopter. I don't know what that means, Doug, but I like it. Wait. Arian says, Jeremy, you're a bit hypocritical. You fat as well. At least 20 pounds unnecessary fat. Delaney is skinny. Yeah. I guess she doesn't like her own cooking. Hey, Delaney, cook some Indian food. So tasty. Thank you, Arian. I appreciate that.
I mean, I eat. It's just I don't hold on to the fat, so... And Jeremy, by the way, is not fat. He's actually really, really fit, guys.
I got a couple pounds, but that's about as much as I can spare. So,
right.
Let me just read a little bit about what this program is, but then I'm not gonna get into the details because I'm gonna get to the bigger picture for you guys here. By the time I'm done talking about this article, I want you to be convinced that doom is the only possible outcome because of our reliance on technology. So if you feel a sense of impending doom, that means I've done my job. Quote, yes. iConstituents e-newsletter system is an external service available for house offices to purchase. At this time, the CAO is not aware of any impact to house data, the office said. The CIO is coordinating with impacted offices supported by iConstituent and has taken measures to ensure that the attack does not affect house network and offices data. So, vendor, that's the key word here, is vendor. Now, for those of you who don't work in the industry or don't work in corporations and IT, you may or may not be aware of the term vendor and what that really means. Vendor refers to a partner company whose services that you use to accomplish your objectives. So, for example, a lot of companies use something like Salesforce. Salesforce is a vendor for other companies who do their business. And when you have a large corporation like that, you end up having many, many vendors that you have critical infrastructure linked with, or you have a network connection shared with, or you use their product that may become compromised. So, and when I say many vendors, I mean potentially like hundreds. If you run like a retail business that has, say Target, for example. Target's a great example because they got hacked a few years back, and this is kind of one of the most noteworthy ones in the retail space recently. They were hacked through their air conditioner. Okay, because the company that manages their air conditioning systems for all their stores got compromised, and they were able to, through the air conditioning network, get onto the cash registers. So, painting the picture here for you that even if your business, if I have the best cybersecurity in my business or the house, okay, we're talking about the office of the chief administrator for the U.S. House. So that goes down. Guess what? We can't pass any laws. We can't do any of the whatever the House does. They have, if their operations were tip top, if they had 100% security in their operations, which is never possible to begin with, they're still linked with dozens and dozens of external vendors who at any point in time could also become compromised, and then by a lateral movement, which means moving sideways into somebody else's, in your network or in a network that's connected to you, compromise your network. So you could have the best security on the planet, but a vendor gets compromised and then you're done. And this is kind of an example of what happened here with the U.S. House. Okay, so now, in the span of 3 weeks, we've seen a quarter or a third of the U.S. oil supply shut down because of a cyber attack. We've seen the majority of the U.S. meat supply shut down by a cyber attack. And almost as if I called it last week, because last week I said, wow, this is a lot of cyber attacks. It's only a matter of time before we see your critical infrastructure. Now we see our actual government offices being hacked as well. So I have to represent the question to you. How long until our critical infrastructure, a.k.a. the energy grid or the water systems, are being hacked?
Well, I mean, Jeremy, if they hired you to be their cyber defense force, then this probably wouldn't happen as bad as it is. But because they're not hiring you to defend them, then let it happen.
Yeah, no, I don't think I'd want that responsibility.
Right.
Kind of like in the Colonial Pipeline hack. As soon as the news of the hack broke, they saw a listing for a new cybersecurity manager on their website. Because that's exactly what happens if you get hacked and you're running the operations there. You get axed. That's pretty standard.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure if you get axed because you let a hack happen, you're probably not going to be getting very much work in cyber defense after that.
Yeah, that's the problem. So there's a lot of risk involved in that line of work as well. If you're at that level anyway, let's just say that. If you're at somewhere that's noteworthy enough to where when you apply somewhere, they're like, oh, you're the guy from Colonial Pipeline, huh?
Oh, you're the guy from that meat company that got hacked. Oh, okay. Well, definitely not going to hire you.
Yeah, I think you're okay as long as you're not one of those guys. Let's see. Osis in chat says cybersecurity and electrician. Yeah, no, those are definitely two good lines to get into for sure. Let's see. We're talking about fat women and birthing people in chat, so that's fun. Yeah. Biden made a comment.
Lots of yo mama jokes.
That's always good. Cultivating a healthy chat over here, folks. If you don't see it, at least one Yo Mama joke per 10 lines, you're not at the level you need to be. But let's real quick aside on that. I did see Biden use the term birthing people in a speech lately. Did you see that, Delaney?
I did. And
are you offended at all? Because you can actually give birth.
I kind of am. I like what Holly Midlife in YouTube chat said. She said, "Birthing people is the biggest FU to women, reducing us to a vessel. Thank you, leftists. So progressive, you're sending us back to the kitchen." I mean, yeah, that's how I feel too. It's like this is what we've been boiled down to. We're just vessels to give birth. We're not why not just call us women? And then on top of being able to give birth, we can also do so many other things.
You're assuming that they're implying that only women are going to be giving birth. Now only biological women are going to be giving birth. So that's not the case. Okay, don't be exclusive. Don't exclude the transgender women who might decide that they want to also give birth.
Oh yeah, how are they going to do that without a uterus?
I don't know the details. I just know that birthing people exist, and we need to acknowledge their existence with mentions by our president. That's the only way. See, the only way that they can feel like their existence isn't marginalized is if the president mentions them as such. Otherwise, they feel like their entire life is meaningless and they don't actually exist. At least that's what they've told me.
This is also so stupid. F you, Biden. Sorry.
It's a big joke, but that really is the end result of all the transgender stuff and trying to accommodate for the 0.5% of the population that we're trying to include.
Remember that it got raised. I think it's 0.8% of the population now. So
you got that transgender effect in full swing. People are you get a lot of credit, you get a lot of likes on Twitter if you come out or Instagram if you come out as tranny. So I can definitely see that.
Or if you're a dude that's going to prison and you don't want to go to the man prison because you're going to get effed over, just call yourself a tranny and you'll go to the women's prison, and then you can have all the hoo-ha you want.
I'm keeping that in the back pocket just in case, for a rainy day, in case something goes wrong. I definitely will request the female prison if I end up going to prison. But I mean, if I'm going to prison, why not? It's all, everything's all gone at that point.
Freaking Harry, and he said we need to replace the word woman with cook.
Steve with the $5 super chat. He says, devastated by the loss of Andre Rene Rosimov. You will be missed.
Okay, whoever that is.
All right, here we go. We're going to go to Google. We're going to check.
Andre Rene.
Steve does this every time. Okay. Oh, Andre the Giant, of course. Yes. Wow, that's his actual name. Rosimov.
Yeah, I think.
Andre the Giant. Yes.
He's from.
Rest in peace to Andre.
Yeah, R.I.P. buddy. We love you.
He died 20 years ago, but he will be missed.
He definitely will be missed. Feeling a great loss in the WWE universe without you there, buddy.
The remake of that movie will not be the same without him. Thank you for that, Steve. Appreciate it. And you guys know what movie I'm talking about, okay? Don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about.
Don't act like you don't know.
So we got 2 chats came in on stereo, and then we'll move on to the next story here. We got one from Bill.
So, guys, long time no speak. I know both of you kind of had to move, and I've been busy because my wife's about ready to have a baby. But I will have you back over on the Ends Justify the Memes sometime in the future. But I just did want to bring up, speaking of vendors, my wife used to work for Project Veritas, and we got an interesting call from a former coworker a little while ago about Salesforce not wanting to support them anymore, and this is one of the problems with a vendor. And it just really surprised me that James had not figured out that he should have his own independent server and service. So this is a big flaw for a lot of people where they don't provide their own resources, security, that kind of stuff, and makes them susceptible to the whims of those vendors based on politics. Anyways, guys, talk to you later. Bye.
Bye, Bill. Love you.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, looking forward to getting back on your show. Good luck with the delivery and all that. Bill's living the dream, making little babies. Great point as well. The vendor thing. I mean, think about once particular vendors get so big that things like vendors like Salesforce are so big that that's kind of like the default when you go to you want something to manage customer relations or whatever it is. You use Salesforce. That's the product to use, right? And if they decide that your politics doesn't jive with their mission statement or whatever kind of BS PR, message they would say, guess what? Those services for you. So it's, I guess it's a little shocking that James didn't have he probably had a backup plan, but I think that'd be a situation where you just run with them as long as you possibly can, and then with the understanding that they're eventually going to find out and kick you off. So.
Yeah, and I mean, so
sounds like our relationship with YouTube.
Yeah, so Salesforce cut their business ties with Project Veritas. What other resources are there available for companies that this happens to? Really, I don't.
Well, there are options
I don't know
available,
of any.
but the problem is it's never going to be as good. So that company, when you're forced to use the backup to whatever Salesforce is, like the free open source version, you instantly lose competitiveness with your competitors because you are not the product is not as good. So
yeah, it's not as readily recognized by people. So that's why I'm that's my question is yes, he should have had a backup plan or figured out some other way, but it's really what kind of backup is there to something that's so big and has so much reach to people and has so much has the market kind of cornered.
Yep, no, it's a great question, and you know what? We might find some answers or potentially even more questions in the next article here. But before we jump to that, I got 2 more comments that came in on Stereo. We got Osis with a follow-up, and then somebody new.
When you were bringing up cybersecurity last week, it got me thinking. And I did some ethical hacking back in the day, so I knew about your MAC addresses when you did the Mike Lindell debunking video. But as you know, a lot of our electronics motherboards in particular come from China, and there's proof even back in 2018 Chinese manufacturers, because they're run by the government technically, have been putting unnecessary spying microchips on their motherboards. So you don't even need a dumbass employee to pick up a random USB thumb drive to put it on your system. You're buying pre-hacked hardware. But of course they're going to keep blaming Russia. Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, that's a great point. And they do try to divert to Russia every possible chance they get. But I think that's one of the reasons why. You just hit on one of the core reasons why. Nobody really gets to this level of analysis, but I think this is one of the major reasons why people hated Trump so much, because there was a concerted effort by China to encourage hatred of Trump through the media, through the institutions, because Trump did what? He wanted to impose controls on China to control exactly what he's talking about by saying that we don't want I know they tried to put some regulations on Huawei, we don't want Huawei devices to be used by any government agency, because Huawei comes from who? China, directly from China, one of the biggest manufacturers. So obviously that's a smart move. If you know you're at war with a country like China, would you openly allow them to just bring in millions of devices into government agencies where they can collect data and be endpoints to control by China? Another perfect example of Trump taking direct action in this realm was TikTok. TikTok was created where? In China. Trump wanted to ban TikTok. And TikTok is an application that you can install on any phone, regardless of where it came from. So think about this. China has an app on millions of phones in America that they could literally push one update out to this app and it would be approved through Google, because when you do apps and stuff on Google, it has to be approved. They go through kind of a vetting process. This would go through just fine because TikTok's already approved and well known. They could update their phones with just a little minor security update or something like that turns it into a weapon for China. It weaponizes it. It tries to spread laterally into whatever network you're connected to. So think about that. You're chilling at home with your phone. You have TikTok. China decides they want to go all out war. They they send out an update to TikTok. You download the update, and then immediately the TikTok app tries to infiltrate whatever network that you're on and spread itself. So immediately China has access to millions of networks in America. Think about that. Just as you try to fall asleep tonight.
So that means go throw away your phone. Never
Well,
look back. Get a flip phone.
Ideally,
Get a flip phone.
Ideally, yeah, but that's too much of a sacrifice for people to make these days. That's the best thing you could do, obviously, just to try to mitigate that to the best degree is use an Android phone, and I'm happy to explain why. But I'm gonna jump to this stereo comment here from somebody new.
I'll be glad when everybody accepts the fact that COVID was a big scam and that the people that really died from COVID, they died from maybe the cold or flu virus. But let me tell you something. This COVID has increased a lot of people's pockets. The hospitals get at least some thousands of dollars for each patient that comes to the hospital.
Yes.
They had to write false documents. They had to say, well, people had COVID when they really didn't. It was all a big scam.
Oh, man, you are going to love our next story, buddy. Also a little confusing because your icon is a woman. But, hey, I'm not sure what pronoun to use for you. Sir, ma'am, zer. Let's call you a Zim.
Zimzer.
Go Zimzer. You are going to love our next story because it is exactly that topic. What were the numbers? What are the incentives behind claiming that you had higher COVID numbers? We'll explore all of that coming up next. I feel like I'm doing cheesy, Learning Channel commercials now.
Yeah, this is like a Saturday morning cartoon. Like, find out what happens next.
Exactly.
Stay
Yeah,
tuned.
trust me, you'll want to hear it. That's a really good story. You're not going to want to miss it. Anyway, we got one more comment that just came in, and then we'll move on.
Well, blessings, guys, on this late talk show. Well, for me, anyway, I just come across it. I hope you lot are well. It's funny because right now there's a petition to the government UK technical consultation on proposed amendments to the General Permitted Development Order for electronic communications development to support the deployment of 5G and extend mobile coverage. Yeah, and we have to appeal for that before the 14th of June. Or it will allow the deployment of radio equipment housing onto people's homes and schools.
Huh.
So yeah, it's getting real tight out here, mate.
Oh man. Well, I mean, that's just another person in the UK to give us a correspondence about what's going on when it comes to technology.
Yeah,
So
I always love hearing about what's going on over there. Thanks for keeping us in the loop. The 5G stuff is very contentious, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I'd love to explore that more. But we got one story on tech stuff, and then we're gonna move on to the COVID one, because this COVID one is gonna be bomber. It's gonna be good. Okay, from MSN.com again. I try to use neutral sources, neutral sources. Nobody's gonna complain about me using MSN. Okay, so Fastly. Have you guys heard of a service called Fastly? No, you probably haven't.
I haven't.
And you know how I know you haven't heard of it? Because I haven't heard of it. So Fastly had an outage today, and it just broke Amazon, Reddit, PayPal, Twitch, and much of the internet. This is breaking news from just 6 hours ago. I wasn't even aware of it until I went to find this. Went to look for stories for today. So let's briefly skim the article a little bit, and then we'll talk about the implications of, again, the centralizing technology. Today will be remembered as the day the internet broke, before swiftly being fixed again. On Tuesday morning, websites including Amazon, Reddit, Spotify, eBay, Twitch, Pinterest, and unfortunately CNET, which I think is where the article is originally from, hence the mention, went offline due to major outage at a service called Fastly. Everywhere you looked, there were 503 errors and people complaining they couldn't access key services and news outlets, demonstrating just how much of the internet relies on this largely unheard of cloud computing service. So, what is Fastly? Now, the best way I can explain it is Fastly is a load balancer for websites and web services. So when you think of a website, it's hosted in a physical location. Okay, so it's hosted in, let's just say, San Francisco. It's hosted in the Bay Area. What Fastly does is it provides other locations for these websites to be loaded from, so that you get faster response times if you're accessing the website from, say, Europe. And a lot of people go through the load balanced version of these websites provided by Fastly. So when Fastly, this one company, goes down, is there a commonality in these stories that we're talking about at all? When this one service went down, it took down Amazon, Reddit, Spotify, eBay, Twitch, Pinterest, a lot of major websites. And the best part is that there was nothing really that those companies could do. So I'm trying to illustrate with this story one of the long-standing themes of this podcast / live stream, and that is decentralization. This is the exact opposite of decentralization. When you centralize your infrastructure like this, whether it's physical or digital, you run the risk of a single point of failure. And this is exactly what's happening here. Now, you guys may be familiar with Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a little bit more of a well-known service that kind of provides like DDoS protection, things like that. So a lot of these sites are using Cloudflare in conjunction with Fastly. So you can imagine if it wasn't Fastly that went out, maybe Cloudflare could have went out. And Cloudflare also provides access to a lot of sites. And we've seen Cloudflare outages in the past that have taken sites down. So, I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Delaney? Is it a good idea for us to be putting all of our services that we use globally onto one company?
No, absolutely not. I think this should be a wake-up call and maybe a potential like inspiration for individuals or a group of individuals who are kind of in this realm and understand this to come together and create competition for these things, because if our internet traffic is heavily relying on two companies to handle all that, I'm sorry, there needs to be more competition. Like just with anything, if there's only two different companies that provide service for 10,000 people, you're not going to be able to handle all the huge load that's going on. So we need more competition in this sphere.
That's a great point. Yeah, the competition thing is an angle that I hadn't thought about, but it shows, I think it's a symptom of being early in the internet age still. So a lot of people today, especially us, like we weren't born with the internet, but we had the internet as we were growing up. As people, hey, calm down back there. People, there's kids these days who were born and raised on tablets on the internet, so they think the internet's basically just always kind of been there, right? So to them, they don't know that we're still very early in the stages of the internet. And I think this is a symptom of that. Like, hey, keep in mind, you're still really early in this whole like internet thing, and you should not be putting all of your services on the relying on one company to provide the global internet services to people. This is a lesson that, as you say, hopefully we'll learn, and smaller competitors will pop up to provide a more decentralized version of the same service, which is necessary. You need this service, but it's probably not a good thing to, it's almost like a monopoly in a sense where
it is, yeah.
Fastly, not inherently, there's no intent to create a monopoly. It's just that with these services, it's the way that all tech services work. People complain about Twitter being a monopoly. They didn't choose to be a monopoly. It just so happened that they were the best one in the market. There wasn't a lot of competitors, so naturally they rose to the top and they became the tool that everybody uses. Same thing with things like Salesforce and other tools we've been mentioning tonight. Nobody starts out saying, oh, I'm going to take everybody, I'm going to form a monopoly. No, it just so happens that with these tools and security and technology, tools stand out above the rest, and then they experience exponential growth and they become the product for that particular service. And this is yet another example of that happening and that going wrong. So remember that all the services you love to use
we can't,
are all
we
centralized.
Definitely can't have sorry, Jeremy, sorry.
No, go ahead.
was going to say we don't want monopolies because we've learned through history and just understanding of business that monopolies do not breed goodness. They don't breed people to improve. If somebody just corners a market, they don't really have the inspiration to do better and be stronger and, actually compete. They're just like, okay, I got this. Chevy and Ford and Dodge and all these like car companies and car manufacturers all came out because they wanted competition. If the competition wasn't a thing, then we would all be driving Fords right now, because that would be the only car company that ever sprung up.
I think we have to come up with a new term for this, because I don't think the word monopoly accurately really describes what this is. Monopoly, well, maybe it does, but monopoly to me has kind of like a negative connotation to it, whereas this is a very organic. This is the result of very organic processes. So I don't know. Maybe monopoly works. It's something I got to think about how to really...
Maybe for this situation it's not a monopoly. Maybe there's just like, what would be a proper adjective?
It's
like
just a highly centralized.
It's like
there's no uncompetitive market.
It's like It's like non-competitive market right now, because not a lot of companies are going to be willing to invest money into having a company that does like internet traffic. Like really, like there's money in it. There's money to be made, but I just don't think there's a lot of people who, one, know how to do it, and two, have the capital to actually start doing it and build something that lots of these big name companies, like, think about it. You had Spotify, you had Pinterest, you had all of these, and Amazon, like, yeah, you have all these big companies going with this one company, probably because like there's only like three other companies. But if there was like more competition, I think that it would help. And hey, maybe like they can all like band together, like the corporate media, and just buy each other out and or something like that.
So
I don't know, but it has to be a solution other than just like we all just rely on these three companies.
Yeah, the problem is that there are alternatives to Fastly out there, but they don't have the same capacity as Fastly. So that's why I don't like the word monopoly. It's just that there isn't any alternative, like viable alternatives out there. It just so happened that Fastly was the first. They matured the quickest. They created the largest capacity. I don't know. Maybe it is a monopoly. I think it technically does classify as a monopoly, but same thing with Twitter. There's alternatives, but nobody's really using them. So because they were the first.
Yeah, I would say it's like a non-competitive right now until something happens that.
That's the moral
it's a problem.
Story. It's a bad thing. This is that we have to acknowledge is happening. So, because think about this: now that this has happened, people know that Fastly is a single point of failure. Now, when cyber attackers, who generally are very random with their actions, they don't really generally target companies or organizations. It's just they spread out, they shoot whatever they got on the internet, whatever it can actually land on is what they're exploiting. What if somebody like Russia or China wanted to actually targeted exploit Fastly or Cloudflare or even Amazon, who hosts a lot of servers themselves? So just a question to keep in your head as we continue on through this technological golden age.
Right. I mean, this is just what happens. Like, things like this are going to pop up, and people are going to see this and go, you know what? I don't want this to happen to me or to any of the companies that I work for. So I'm going to enter the market and do something about it. I mean, hopefully. I mean, nowadays with all the people that are so lazy, it's like they're probably not going to do anything about it, but we'll see.
Yeah, there's a bunch of good examples in chat. Stalking Horse says East India Company. Dari says AT&T Bell South. Let's see, All-1. Bill says, monopoly implies controlling market tactics, kind of like the government of the Fed. That's how I see the word monopoly. Like, when I think of monopoly, I think of a company that's using shady tactics to control the market in their favor. And I don't think, like, that's why I don't think that's applicable in these cases, because, like, Twitter, Fastly, stuff like that, they didn't do any of that. They were just the only product that existed for that. So, I don't know.
I agree. Like, in this case, it's not a monopoly. It's just like there's not any competition for them, so they just happen to be in the right place at the right time to corner a market.
Yep.
Now, because of this kind of incident, like I said, maybe it'll inspire more people to create companies to help out with the traffic of all these internet sites.
You know what this
Because
is?
we all know all these people addicted to Pinterest, they got to be able to pin their crap on their board. Otherwise, all hell will break loose.
Oh, for the hour that was down, I bet there was probably about 1,000 people that had panic attacks from not being able to access their instant, gratification stimulation.
Their Pinterest board, they weren't able to pin some macrame on their board.
Here's the theory, and this is a little bit of an experimental work in progress theory on this. This is akin to cancer. What does cancer come from? Cancer comes from the result of too fast cell division and growth. This is akin to cancer in the same fact that when technology is expanding and blowing up so quickly, that you have to fill the demand for certain things like a load balancer for websites, because it's growing so rapidly that it can go wrong very easily. And that's exactly what happened with this here. So I'm just proposing that this is kind of like the equivalent to like a cancer in the analogous representation of the quickly and rapidly growing technology of the 21st century. To get a little philosophical on you guys. Okay, I think it's time. We got 2 stereo comments, and then we'll jump to the COVID story, which you guys are going to love.
Well, hey, again, guys. Look, I'm no
hey.
cyber expert, but generally, redundancy is a good thing in life, and diversity. That is,
Yes.
diversity within yourself, so you are not a one-trick pony, or within your company or whatever it is. You need to have a lot of backups, and I think that's a lot of what you're hinting at. Not to say anything different that you're not saying, but perhaps to add to this conversation. We all, if we are brought down to a monolith and we're only good at one thing, we're all susceptible to failure, a high amount of failure, which versus being highly diverse, having a lot of different skills. If one thing fails, you can move on to something else, and it works the same universally with tech or anything else, even though I'm not a tech guy. So there you have it.
Great comment, actually, and apologize for the Amber Alert that came in the middle of that.
Right?
It was coming in my
Got
first.
tornadoes going over there, Bill?
No, that was me. My iPhone was going off, and then my Android started going off like right after that. But anyway, Bill brings up a great point, and that is, he says the word universal, and I want to just back that up by saying that redundancy and kind of being a jack of all trades isn't necessary. They're not necessarily the same thing, but the point stands is that as a person, an individual, you should be able to do many things. You shouldn't be completely specialized in one thing. And same thing in the professional or technology world as well. You need to have redundancy. You need to be have your irons in many fires at the same time. So maybe if there was another service that you were using for this kind of thing, you would have a backup, an automatic backup to that, and not have to rely entirely on that one service. So it applies. That's kind of an example that I would give for Bill's comment that it should be universal, and I do agree with that. Yeah, no
Agreed.
tornadoes.
Bill. Wow. What was the Amber Alert for? Did a child get kidnapped or something?
Some kid in somewhere in Texas, Corpus Christi. 1-year-old white female. That's unfortunate. But we got one more comment here from Anthony, and then we'll get to the COVID story.
So outages tend to stimulate the market to find different solutions. Like even look at chips, the chip shortage. 2 states, like I think it's Arizona and Texas, are seeing some multiple billion-dollar investments to build U.S.-based chip manufacturers because of all the nonsense going on. Should this have happened before? Yes. I mean, it's interesting that Elon, in order to build Tesla, he needed batteries. Well, what's funny is he can't build cars because he doesn't have chips. So he kind of didn't foresee the biggest bottleneck in the world right now.
Yep. No, that's a great point. that kind of harkens to the saying that necessity is the mother of invention. You don't know that you need something until a catastrophic outage happens, and then it's like, hey, we're having the conversation we're having right now. Maybe we should have something else that also does this. So
that's my whole point is like, I hope that this kind of incident sparks people to come up with a better solution than depending on 3 or 4 different companies to make money. I mean, essentially, like, all of these companies are using this service to make money, and if that service goes down, then their ability to make money goes down. It's the same thing that happens at Walmart when their cash register goes down. It sucks. Like, they can't. It stops them from their ability to make money. And so what's the solution? Find a way to get the cash register open.
And it's not just monetary damages that we're talking about. I'm trying to make you guys fearful because this has personal implications. Think about, for example, if you have a hospital that you're receiving services from, and all of a sudden they are the victim of an attack or their services are out. Well, guess what? Maybe your infusion pump stops working. Maybe you can't get that x-ray. You can't get your prescription filled. You can't do your banking transactions. You can't, you name it, okay? You can't pay your OnlyFans bill. These are high consequential things, okay? Major consequences that we're talking about that you will not be able to fulfill. And as Holly says in chat, Twitch was down. What did the hot tub streams do? Yeah, exactly. We had no hot tub streams for an hour. For those of you who don't know, that's a reference to the failing Twitch site, which used to be about video game streaming and is now degenerated into women in bikinis and hot tubs inside their house. And that's it.
Yep, that's it. No video games anymore. And if you are a video gamer on Twitch, it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, right. You're definitely not making money. Okay, these comments are pouring in.
But typically, knowing how big business works, Fastly has billions in the coffer that they can then go invest in redundancy and fill their own failure. Unfortunately, that's usually how it works.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just all for solutions instead of like these companies going, like, not being able to have traffic flow through their websites because they are like their service is no good anymore. So if they want to pay for to fix their own service, fine, I'll take that.
There's a funny related story to that. Amazon, when they experienced DDoS attacks, I think their initial approach was to try and eliminate the source of the hack, the DDoS attack. So DDoS, for those, I'm assuming that people know what DDoS means. DDoS just means distributed denial of service attacks. So multiple sources are sending a lot of traffic to one place and basically shutting that device down because it can't handle the service. Amazon's original approach was to try and mitigate the incoming traffic, but that was so inefficient that all they did eventually they ended up doing was, as a result of receiving a DDoS attack, they simply spun up more servers to handle the increased load of the DDoS attack. So that's an example of exactly what he's talking about, where you just increase the amount of resources you have to such a vast degree that you just beat it by sheer brute force. And that may be something that Fastly chooses to implement as a solution. Got one comment here from Paul B.
Internet breaks, thoughts most affected.
Yes, thoughts, the ones who get their income from OnlyFans and Twitch, definitely are affected. Okay, guys, are you ready for this one? This is the story that's going to get us banned, by the way. Even though we're simply relaying information, this is going to be the one that gets us kicked off. But you know what? I'm okay with it because it proves something that I said so 100% correct, that I'm willing to take the risk just for the ego boost here. As soon as I can find the window. So we're going to go to Alameda, California, Alameda County, California, for this story from MSN. I didn't intentionally.
It's from MSN. Don't ban us, YouTube.
Yeah, I didn't intentionally get all my sources from MSN, but they just kind of copy from other sources anyway. So really, it's from Washington Examiner. This article is titled, County finds it overcounted COVID-19 deaths by 25%, says some deaths, quote from the article, I'm not saying this, quote, clearly not caused by COVID.
Dun, dun, dun.
Insert sound of nuclear bomb exploding here. So, let me read through a couple of sentences of this, and then we'll give you my opinion and assessment of the situation. From Michael Lee, 1 day ago, a California county is revisiting, that's a good way to put it, its COVID-19 death total after a review found that a quarter of the deaths that were attributed to COVID-19 were not caused by the disease. Yeah, we're not talking about 1%, 2%, 5%. We're talking about 25%.
That's a lot.
Deaths
It's a big number.
were not actually deaths from COVID. And they got a great picture of Governor Newsom here. I mean, I got to figure out what kind of hair gel he uses. See if I can get some of that.
Baby fat.
Freshly harvested baby fat from all the
freshly harvested.
straight from the abortion clinic.
Yep.
All right, continuing off the article. There are definitely people who died from reasons that were clearly not caused by COVID. This is me quoting the article. This is not me making this statement. The Alameda County Public Health Department spokeswoman said there are definitely people who died from reasons that were clearly not caused by COVID. And this is exactly what the guy in stereo was commenting on. Now, I'm going to refrain from using the 4-letter word that starts with an S and ends with an M. However, it's very apparent at this point that the things that I was saying months and months ago, like we don't know how individual counties and hospitals and states are all counting COVID deaths. Are they the same criteria? No, they're not the same criteria. So what does that mean? Can we trust the numbers that they're giving us? The answer was no back then, because we knew any logical person could come to the conclusion that not every single hospital and county and state were all counting the deaths with the same exact criteria. And this is exactly what happens as a result of that. They have to go back and revise because somebody told them, hey, you're not using the same criteria for COVID deaths that we were, so you have to change your COVID deaths criteria. So, hey, look at it this way. You want an easy way to reduce the COVID deaths by 25%? I can tell you right now how we can instantly reduce the amount of deaths by COVID by 25% across the entire, the sky's the limit. What scope do you want to look at? Do you want to go global? Do you want to go national? You want to go at state level? I can take 25% off easily anywhere, because all I have to do is change the algorithm that determines that number. And as we're discovering now, the algorithms were maybe not the best, because now the county health officials are coming out and explicitly saying that there were clearly people who did not die from COVID. I feel so vindicated.
I mean, yeah, that's something that you and I have been saying since we started doing this freaking live stream is we're not saying that people haven't died from the coof. We're just questioning, like, if that number is actually accurate. If somebody like committed suicide and they tested positive for the coof, are you going to count that as a coof death or not? And I think there was lots of that going on. Somebody died from a heart attack, right, and they had the coof. Did they die from the heart attack, or is the hospital going to say they died from the coof?
Right. Now, let's. I think they actually give an explanation of that in here. So at issue from the article, it says at issue was the definition the county was using to count COVID-19 deaths. Oh wow! How about that? Exactly. Requiring only. Listen to this. Oh my God. Requiring only that a patient tested positive for the virus when they died, even if they did not die as a direct result of the virus.
Wow.
In one such case, a person who tested positive for COVID-19 and died in a car crash was recorded as a COVID-19 death. That's literally the joke that we used to describe this phenomenon happening. And this is either the simulation giving us exactly a signal that says, hey, you are living in a simulation. Here's proof, because that is just the quintessential example that we've always used. Or I mean, I don't even know. We live in such an absurd society today that there are people who legitimately thought that this kind of stuff was not going on, and you know what? I'll give them credit because they didn't understand the incentives at play. Now, this goes directly to what the caller on stereo said. There were incentives, and there still are incentives in place for hospitals to claim that they have higher COVID patients. Why? Because of the COVID Relief Act. CARES Act.
Get money.
They get money from the government for every COVID death and every COVID patient that they can claim that they've had. So they are incentivized to say that somebody who died in a car crash died as a result of COVID because, well, when we ran the test at the autopsy, he had COVID. So you got to get that $10 or whatever it is for having that guy because your hospital's failing because the government shut your hospital down. It's a circular, disastrous loop of centralized planning death. But this is another perfect example of incentives. When you set up an incentive for people to fudge the numbers like that, which they did, it's not a conspiracy theory anymore. Okay, I'm not saying that they fudged the numbers is not a false claim. It's directly here from the Washington Examiner, MSN.com, and the county health department official spokeswoman is saying this out loud. So
I would have conversations with family and friends about this, and I would tell them exactly what I say. I'm not saying it's not happening. I just wonder if the number is accurate. And I was like ostracized and called crazy and like told that I don't care about the COVID deaths. And it's like, no, I do. But I just question whether or not these deaths the number is actually accurate. Like that. What's the death toll number now? 700,000, 800,000, 1 million from COVID. How accurate is that number? If just one county, in Alameda County, I looked it up, it says they have 77,624 people. If this one county is saying that they fudged up the numbers by 25%, who's to say like all the other counties across the United States aren't doing something similar to this?
Exactly. It should raise the question. Now, I'm not trying to get you to think anything in particular. I don't care if you think that the numbers are fudged or not fudged. But what you do have to confront now, you are forced to confront with this new knowledge, no matter what side you were on previously, you are forced to confront the question of how is this stuff actually counted? And how could it possibly be counted consistently across, how many counties are there in America? Let's just say 2,000. Let's just ballpark 2,000. 2,000 counties, which with, let's say, 4,000 health systems. Okay, let's just throw some conservative ballparks out there. You're telling me, confronted with this information, you're going to continue on through life with the assumption that 2,000 counties and 4,000 health systems all counted their deaths with the same criteria? Because in order to say that the number we're given for deaths from COVID right now, that's 700,000, in order to tell me that that's a legitimate number, you have to answer yes to that question. You have to answer yes. I believe that all 2,000 counties and all 4,000 health systems across America are counting the deaths the exact same way. And that is a very heavy yes. That's a tall order. If you think you can say yes to that, because that's what you have to do to tell me that 700,000 is a legitimate number, but that's on you, because now I'm in the state where I'm questioning this. I'm not in the state where I'm assigning any kind of maliciousness or intent. I'm simply in a state where I am now questioning, as I always have been. I have always been in a state of questioning, and you should also be in that state now too.
I'm glad that man or woman, whoever it was, because his avatar was kind of confusing, but I'm glad that he said what he said, because I know people are now starting to kind of wake up to what is really going on with this whole thing. I've been trying to wake them up this whole damn time, but I get called crazy until the mainstream media reports it and says something.
The next article is going to be a perfect just capstone on the exact same topic, because what has been the continuing trend as the longer COVID goes on, It's almost as if there's a law programmed into the COVID thing. As the longer COVID goes on, the more lies are revealed. Like the more truths come out as time goes on, because we've already seen now what masks don't work, masks do work. The vaccine isn't going to happen, and then it is going to happen. It was Trump's fault, but then Biden gets all the credit. The deaths are consistent, but wait, no, they're not. Old people going to the nursing homes, but wait, no, that wasn't our fault. Everything, as time goes on, we learn more and more truths about this thing, and it's not looking good for the people. Let's just say it's not looking good for the maskers. It's not looking good for the mutants who clearly are on the side of authoritarian control as a result of this.
Yeah, and Stalking Horse in the YouTube chat says the MSM doesn't talk about COVID cases / deaths today. It's just get vaccinated.
Oh,
because that's
weird, huh?
Yeah, weird. That's funny how that happens. It's like, oh, now all this news coming out about all these counties that have been miscounting the COVID deaths. No, let's not talk about that. It's just get vaccinated because you have to. Because if you don't care about people.
Yeah, here's the progression, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. When as time goes on, the truth comes out. Here's the progression. When COVID first comes out, what are we talking about? Nothing but what? The R naught number. Masks. Oh, how fast does it spread? And then it's the mask thing. And then we stopped talking about the R naught number. And then we started talking about case counts. And then we started talking about progressed to death counts. And then once the death counts got a little desensitized, it was all about hospital beds, because that was the reason for the lockdowns. So we went from R naught to case counts to death counts to hospital beds to what was the next one? Vaccines, and now we're not talking about case counts, deaths, R naught. We're not talking about none of that. None of that gets mentioned at all. It's not like it's just taking a back seat. It's not like it's a sub note in the news article, as these, Don Lemon gives us the nightly brief on where COVID is. They don't just mention it briefly offhand. They don't talk about it at all. 0% talking about that. So that's the progression, man. And as it goes on, you can tell just by the way they change topics that everyone previously has been bullshit, because guess what? The R naught number, they were saying it's going to be super high. Nope, super low. Case counts, super high. But guess what? Death counts are actually really low. Masks work, don't work, you name it. Hospital beds are full, got to lock down. Hospital beds not even close to full anymore, but we don't talk about it. Yet we're still locked down. It's all coming out, folks. It's all coming out. And those of you who questioned everything from the start, you can rest easy knowing that it's all going to come out eventually, and this is just a continuation of that trend.
And they're gonna, the next numbers they're gonna be showcasing all over the MSN is gonna be the number of people who aren't vaccinated. It's like, if your neighbor's not vaccinated, you need to tell them to go get it. It's going to be something like that.
Yeah.
It's like,
probably.
It's like 20 million are still not vaccinated. You better talk to your neighbors and tell them to go get vaccinated.
Well, that's consistent with what? A theme that we talk about a lot here, that we've observed as the behavior of the mutants and of the left, and that is the perfection fallacy. They're going to fall into the perfection fallacy with the COVID stuff too, because what's the narrative going to be? Unless 100% of people aren't vaccinated, we can't get back to normal. We're seeing kind of creeping instances of this happening now, where New York says we can't open up until we get back to 70%. But people aren't going to be satisfied with that. So it's gonna be 80 and then 90. So yeah, that's a great point. What the question is, what's the next step in this progression, where as they slowly back themselves into an inescapable corner.
Yeah, next step is going to be, if you're unvaccinated, you have to wear a certain thing on your clothes, and kind of like be reminiscent of a really, really dark time in world history, when a certain group of people were, forced into re-education camps because they just believed differently.
Well, we already know they want to put us in re-education camps, so that's not too far-fetched. This would be a good reason, a good impetus for them to try and implement those. So Just,
I mean, I was
are you ready
I
for
was
anything?
sitting there waiting. I was sitting there waiting patiently all through Trump's 4 years, waiting to get put into a re-education camp and be zapped because of being the lesbian. But now it's like I'm going to get put into re-education camp because of Biden because I refuse to get vaccinated.
Man, you're always teetering on the razor's edge of just getting thrown in a camp, huh? Must be a rough.
Oh yeah,
It's a rough life.
if not for my sexuality, it's for my individuality. So
There's a great point brought up in chat by Bill and Simon says they mentioned the PCR testing. That was also part of the narrative that was progressed into and then quickly progressed out of as we discovered that the PCR testing thresholds were modified to give higher case count results. So thank you guys for supplementing my list with that. Aptly mentioned. Let's see. Anthony says the truth will be apparent, but most won't believe it, and that's exactly why, Anthony, we talked about earlier in the stream. We're at a kind of a singularity where from here forward, there's going to be two new histories being created, two parallel universes, two movies on the same screen, as it were. Let's see. Well, some people are getting. Doug Master says, I'm going to start wearing a scarlet virus on my shoulder. And I was going to say that some people are getting tattoos of the virus and the vaccine. Have you seen that? Like, what kind of mental illness is that? Where,
I mean, it's the same people that get like their body. They hate him so much, but they're willing to tattoo their name on him.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. Doug says,
it's like, so you hate him so much, but you'll get his name tattooed on you.
Let's see. Oh, PJ Fan says a comment that we're going to probably get banned for. He says, 40-year-old female neighbor needed emergency brain surgery after a blood clot after getting her first AstraZeneca. Well, okay, here's the funny thing about that. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. Go ahead, Delaney, real quick.
I was going to say that might go against the YouTube's TOS about COVID misinformation, even though it's an anecdotal story, and there's lots of anecdotal stories about these kinds of things going on with the jab.
This is the funny part. There is the existence of a CDC managed or government managed database called the Vaccine Adverse Event Reaction System or something like that. It's VAERS. You guys know about it. We talked about it previously before. Mm-hmm. They track adverse reactions to vaccines, not just COVID, all vaccines, including COVID. Mm-hmm. And when you present somebody with the numbers from that database, what is the argument? Every single time, their initial argument is what? Well, we don't know how that data was collected. We don't know what the consistency of the data is.
It's self-reporting. Oh, my God.
And I say, well, I'm glad you're asking that question now because that's what I've been asking the whole entire time about the case counts and the death counts, and look at how vindicated I am now. Eat it. So it's just funny that they ask about, they're so concerned about the data consistency when it's the VAERS database, but when it's the COVID counts or the death counts, oh God, no, don't even question it. Perfectly fine. 2,000 counties, 4,000 health systems, all accurately counted consistently across all of them. No question. Absolutely. Yeah. That's the telltale sign of a mutant right there because they're not capable of thinking for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
All right, let's and to capstone the whole thing, this is in the continuation of there. I don't think there's any greater story right now in the news. No greater I told you so than the lab leak theory that is now apparently becoming mainstream.
Oh yeah.
This is from dailymail.com. Now, I was never making any kind of claims about lab leak. I can't claim any kind of, vindictive redemption on this kind of stuff because I never said it came from a lab. I always said that it's possible it could have come from a lab. But there was, according to dailymail.com, there existed a report as early as last May 2020, just a few months into the pandemic, that concluded that it was plausible coronavirus leaked from the Wuhan lab and said that the theory deserved further investigation. So,
wow.
Yeah, and the one question that I have always been asking since day one, though, was with more of a curious tone, not in an accusatory tone, but isn't it curious that we're not very interested? We're not very concerned about finding where this thing came from. We seem to be taking our damn time figuring out where this came from. And you would think, according to every pandemic movie that I've watched anyway, that finding patient zero, finding the origin, that's like the most important thing. So apparently Hollywood lied to me. That's not important at all, I guess. In real life, you don't care about where it came from. You don't care about holding anybody accountable. You don't care about preventing it from happening in the future. All you do is care about imposing controls on people in an authoritarian fashion to further your political ideology. But I'm not supposed to say that part. Anyway, continuing on from the article here, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. If you guys know of that laboratory, it is legit. Lawrence Livermore is one of the premier scientific labs in America. This isn't like Louis' laboratory operated out of a garage in Silicon Valley or something. Okay, this is Lawrence Livermore, who published the report on May 27th of 2020. The California team concluded it was plausible COVID-19 was man-made. They analyzed the genetic makeup of the virus to explore how it was evolved, and they said it was possible it leaked from the lab in Wuhan, and that it merited further research. So the question is, why did we ignore that at the time? Or why were people like Fauci telling us that it came from a pangolin of all animals? Why blame the poor pangolin, man? I love pangolins. Why would you blame them? But honestly, the Fauci emails have since been leaked, and we've all seen. You guys have all heard the news about the Fauci emails where he was talking about this, and it was basically apparent that he knew that it was possible way back then, as he was telling us that there was no scientific evidence that it came from a lab. And I love that argument. I'm going to be using that a lot. I advise you guys to use this one a lot as well. You know, so if somebody claims, for example, that you're racist, you know, just say, well, maybe, but there's no scientific evidence. Somebody claims that, you know, anytime somebody makes any kind of claim that you don't like, all you have to do is simply point out the fact that there was no randomized controlled studies to prove that fact, and then it's instantly disproved. It did not happen. If there's no randomized controlled studies, there's no scientific data, then it's not possible. That at least seems to be what the methodology that they want us to think by. I don't know. What do you think about all this, Delaney?
I
Are you shocked? That's the question.
No, I'm not shocked. Like, I really am not shocked. Like, we talked about this like months ago. They didn't, like, the CDC and the WHO even try to go into China to figure out where this thing came from, and the Chinese authorities like told them no, or like made it really hard for them to come in.
Yep.
So there is something else. There is something going on here. There is an origin to all of this. They don't want us to know, because if history has told us anything, people can't handle it. People would not be able to handle like the fact that they've been wrong this whole year, and that they've locked themselves up, and we've locked our children into their houses and not allowed them to go to school for something, and been lied to this whole time. People would not be able to handle that. And so they're trying to cover their butts and make sure that people don't really know the truth.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. We're in kind of a trap of sunk costs, where we've gone so far, we made so many claims that we have to pretend like they're true now. In order to post hoc justify torturing children, shutting down businesses, implementing authoritarian controls on a national level, we have all of that relies on the fact that this was a natural thing, didn't come out of a lab, and that there's nobody to blame and there's nobody to hold accountable. So, yeah, no, that's a really good point.
We should hold ourselves accountable for the fact that we allowed this to go on for as long as it did. Honestly, that's who we should be held accountable. Like, I don't even care about holding the Chinese accountable, because we know they're not going to be held accountable for any of this. I don't care about holding even the federal government accountable for this. We need to blame ourselves for like allowing this to like go on as long as it did. That people allow themselves to be brainwashed and be led to believe that they haven't been lied to for this last year.
Yeah, and that's really the only blame that's ever going to make any difference anyway, because you could say China all day long and nothing's ever going to happen, because we all know, the leadership is not on board with that. You could blame it on anybody you want, but nothing's going to happen as a result of that. The only thing that's going to make a difference is telling yourself that, something like this happens again, maybe you'll think about it a little bit differently. But I think I don't know. This the question is anything. And that goes directly to, what's going to happen as a result of this. This is becoming a mainstream thing now, where we're starting to understand. People on CNN, MSNBC are actually starting to admit that this could have been the result of a lab leak. But that should be about 1 day of coverage, saying, okay, it looks like, according to 2020 reports, this is potentially a lab leak. That's about all the coverage that requires. The next step, and the most immediate step, is, how do we get into high gear finding out exactly where this came from and who's accountable for that leak? So the question is really if that switch is going to happen, and I would guess no, it's not going to happen.
I don't think it's going to happen either.
Because it directly implicates Fauci, it implicates, like you said, all of our governmental leaders. Trump would hold them accountable. Trump would go after China, but nobody else would.
And with the Fauci email leaks, there are people out there who are like, I didn't read anything wrong. I didn't read anything on his emails that implicates anything. It's like, he said in his emails that the masks don't work and that this is like, it's all just like, he has been in on this from the beginning. Yep. He really has, you folks. Like, y'all think that Fauci made the best decisions for the country when it came to all this stuff? No, he didn't. He really did not, folks. Telling children that they can't go to school is not what's best for this country. I'm sorry, it's not.
Jesus, we got the Frail Jew in chat says, I was hospitalized less than 2 weeks after the second Pfizer shot, diagnosed with idiopathic renal infarcts. I don't even know what that is, but it sounds horrifying. And then he goes on to say that I'm starting to feel better now. I'm glad you're feeling better, dude. That's horrifying, man.
Yeah, man.
The nephrologist says I will likely need to stay on blood thinners lifelong. Jesus. He's otherwise healthy in his late 30s with great diet and exercise. Yeah, well, that's, man. Glad you're feeling better. I hope you make a full recovery, buddy, but that is rough. Holy smokes.
And then these people who push the vaccines on people be like, oh, well, that doesn't happen to everybody. Okay, yeah. But don't you think that enough incidents like this is enough to kind of make you question whether or not you should get the jab or not?
Yeah, our resident EMS, I think he's an EMS guy, Synergy says, idiopathic means unknown. Renal infarct means blockages in the kidneys. Jeez. Son of a... Oh, man, that's... yeah, well, see, that goes back to the data collection problem. We don't have enough data long-term to know how this stuff really affects people. So, and, we can't even talk about the I word as far as potential other treatments for this thing. There's alternatives that exist that are effective to the vaccine, but you don't make any money off those. So...
Yeah, you can't use the I word or the H word because those two words are banned, and we'll get our second strike on YouTube if we even talk about them.
Probably, yeah. But that's going to be interesting to see how these social media companies is the tight controls and moderation over these topics going to adjust in proportion to the truth as it comes out. Like, you used to be able to say lab leak. You used to be able to not say lab leak at all, but now it's basically well understood and accepted that this is a possible thing, and it always has been. Are they going to adjust their regulations, YouTube and Twitter and whatnot, to accommodate that, or are they going to maintain that in order to persist, to keep that one chain of history, that second movie on the same screen, to keep that persistence, that keep it perpetuating? That's the question, and I'm going to guess no.
The Frail Jew, I'm glad that you're feeling better, but your story is honestly even more reason for me to not get the jab. I've thought about it, but now I'm like, no, I know too many people who've had adverse reactions to these things. And I don't want to be a science experiment for a vaccine that hasn't even been approved by the FDA. It's not approved. It's under an emergency. What is it? Like the emergency, like it's like approved for emergency, but it's not like actually like we've gone through it, studied the
EUAs,
research, and
emergency
approved
use
it.
approval.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not like they've actually done the studies, done the research, seen the results and are like, okay, this is fine to like give to people. This is like for emergency use. They're like, hey, okay, emergency is allowing us to let this happen. And I'm sorry, I just don't want to be another number in somebody's experiment. I just don't. I'm too young and pretty to let that happen.
Fun fact, those EUAs, those emergency use authorizations, rely on the absence of an alternative effective treatment. So, talking about incentives again, is there an incentive there to dissuade people from looking at alternative treatments in order to maintain the EUAs? A lot of questions. I know some of you guys watch Weekly Narrative for entertainment. Some of you guys watch it to hear stories that don't get talked about anywhere else. But some of you, the people who really love pain and anguish, you watch this because you want to leave the stream with 10,000 questions in your head that you now have to figure out the answers to, and that's what you got after tonight for sure.
For sure.
Let's jump back to the chat real quick. The article goes on to talk about how Fauci lied in Congress and how he sent money to the lab through organizations that he funded indirectly. They love that word, indirectly, but we already know all about that. I'm going to do some risk mitigation because I am actually familiar with risk management. I'm going to do some risk mitigation and choose not to talk about that on this particular stream, especially considering we are already at the 2-hour mark. So, let's see. Preach says Synergy TYDL. Oh, young dude. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, to me.
He says, preach, girl. Let's see. Bill says, remember, folks, the jab in any form has immunity. Yeah, that's a good point. My wife wanted me to get the jab. I lied and went to In-N-Out. Well, it's no coincidence
Best
that
decision right there.
The woman who has a natural innate tendency to want to be protective is trying to convince you to get the vaccine. Let's see. Yeah, Dari says the jab is experimental, period. And that's really it. Stalking Horse says, did I get a gun ad on that page? It wouldn't shock me because I have been shopping for guns online lately, actually.
America.
We got 2 comments from Paul in chat. One that's probably a little outdated, but I'm going to hit it anyway, and then a follow-up.
So what I want to know is, okay, one county, and it's going to turn into dozens over the next many months. They update their data. CDC ever going to update their data? No, they won't. They are going to cement the narrative of COVID at the federal level forever.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
They're probably gonna build a monument for all the COVID deaths in Washington D.C.
And that's the only number that anybody's ever going to look at, so that's the only number that actually matters. Despite the fact that we've already seen proof of a 25% discrepancy in particular counties. Now, here's a question that I forgot to bring up that I wanted to ask you. Yet another question that you can ask yourself regarding that number. Do you think that 25% reduction, do you think the number is now 100% accurate? Or is it only a little more accurate? As in, how many different adjustments could you make to the algorithm that would further refine it and get it more accurate? And the premise is underlying the whole thing that we all have to understand and acknowledge is that we will never, ever have a perfect, accurate count. Do not fall into the perfection fallacy that leftists so rely upon unconsciously. We can never know the true number of COVID deaths. We never will. So you can never say, oh, well, we were 25% off from the real number. You can never, ever say that. And you could definitely, that's just for one county. One county with 1,600 cases that got reduced to 1,200 because of an adjustment in the algorithm. You can never get to accurate number on a national level with hundreds of thousands of numbers involved. It's simply not possible. So the problem is the truth is not ever really accessible. And since the truth is not accessible, we don't know how close we are to it. So they can make another adjustment, and it would go down to 800. So you'd have a 50% reduction in the numbers, and then they would say, oh, yeah, no, this is accurate. This is what we really meant. This is what the criteria that the state wants us to measure it by. The criteria are subjective. Okay? That's... so, yeah, it's pretty rough. But, hey, as long as I get a nice, shiny number to look at on the CNN Chiron and say, oh, my God, why isn't anyone wearing the masks? Why aren't you getting the vaccine? I'll be happy. That's all I want. Paul's got another one.
Lied about getting the vaccine to go to In-N-Out Burger. Fucking king, man.
Right?
You know what? I went
Total king.
into Costco, and they didn't even ask me. If you're not wearing a mask, I don't have to wear a mask anywhere anymore. They just don't even ask. It's great.
They just assume because you're not wearing a mask that you're probably vaccinated, and they can't
Yeah.
really like. It's not like you. And if they ask you for your vaccine card, just be like, "Yo, I forgot it. My bad."
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh. I see buffering on the YouTube. Let's see if you can make it through one
Yep.
more comment from Osis.
They have